The rain pounded the roof of the old Virginia diner, each drop a hammer strike against Caleb's heart. He was 16, sitting across from his mother, Diane, whose eyes burned with a mix of fear and determination he'd never seen before. She slid a pamphlet across the table, its edges worn, the words "Path to Purity" screaming in bold red letters. "Caleb, this camp will help you," Diane said, her voice trembling but firm, like she was trying to convince herself as much as him. "It's what God wants. It's what we need." Caleb's stomach churned. The diner's neon lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly glow on the pamphlet that promised to fix him. He'd known this moment was coming since he'd come out to her 6 months ago, a confession that had shattered the fragile peace of their small-town life. Diane, a single mother who clung to her church like a lifeline, had spent those months spiraling, praying, pleading, and now pushing him toward a conversion camp in the Blue Ridge Mountains. He didn't touch the pamphlet. Instead, he met her gaze, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, I'm not broken." Diane's face crumpled, but she didn't back down. "You don't understand. Caleb, this is for your soul. For our family." She reached for his hand, but he pulled away, the sting of her words cutting deeper than the rain outside. The small town of Willow Creek, Virginia, was a place where secrets were buried under layers of Sunday sermons and polite smiles. Caleb had grown up here, a quiet kid who loved sketching in his notebook and dreaming of a world beyond the cornfields. But when he'd told his best friend, Marcus, that he was gay, the truth had spread like wildfire. Whispers followed him at school, and the church elder Swode once praised his art now looked at him like he was a stain on their pristine community. Diane, a nurse who worked double shifts to keep their modest house, had always been his rock, but his coming out had cracked something in her. She'd spent her life leaning on faith to survive an abusive marriage, a bitter divorce, and the weight of raising Caleb alone. Now, that same faith told her his identity was a sin, a test she was failing. She'd tried everything: prayer groups, late-night talks with Pastor Reynolds, even grounding Caleb for acting out. Nothing worked. The camp was her last resort, a desperate bid to save her son from what she'd been taught was eternal damnation. Caleb, though, had his own plans. He'd been secretly texting Jamie, a college freshman he'd met online through an LGBTQ+ support group. Jamie was everything Willow Creek wasn't: bold, unapologetic, and free. Their late-night chats were Caleb's lifeline, a reminder that there was a world where he could be himself. Jamie had warned him about conversion camps, sharing stories of kids who'd come back broken, their spirits crushed under the weight of shame. Caleb wasn't going to let that happen. That night, after Diane fell asleep, Caleb crept to his room and packed a small bag. He left a note on the kitchen table. "I'm sorry, Mom. I need to find myself. I'll be okay." By dawn, he was on a bus to Richmond, where Jamie had promised to meet him. The rain followed him, blurring the world outside the window. But for the first time in months, Caleb felt like he could breathe. In Richmond, Jamie was waiting at the station, his bright red hoodie a beacon in the gray morning. He was taller than Caleb had imagined, with a warm smile that made Caleb's heart race. "You made it," Jamie said, pulling him into a hug that felt like safety. Caleb clung to him, the weight of Willow Creek falling away with every second. But back home, Diane woke to find the note. Her hands shook as she read it, her chest tightening with panic. She called Pastor Reynolds, who assured her Caleb was just confused and would come back. But Diane couldn't shake the image of her son alone in a world she didn't understand. She grabbed her car keys and drove to Richmond, determined to bring him home no matter what it took. Caleb and Jamie spent the day wandering the city, talking about everything from music to dreams of a life where they didn't have to hide. Jamie took him to a small cafe where queer kids gathered, a place alive with laughter and acceptance. For Caleb, it was like stepping into a dream. But as the sun set, his phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, "Your mom's in Richmond. She's looking for you." Panic gripped Caleb. He wasn't ready to face her, not when he'd just tasted freedom. Jamie squeezed his hand. "You don't have to go back," he said. "But if you do, I'll be with you." Caleb nodded, his heart torn between the boy who made him feel alive and the mother who'd given him everything. Diane, meanwhile, was scouring the city, her desperation growing with every dead-end lead. She didn't know what she'd say when she found him, only that she couldn't lose him. Not like this. Not to a world she'd been taught to fear. As night fell, Caleb and Jamie stood on a bridge overlooking the James River, the city lights reflecting on the water. Caleb's phone buzzed again, Diane's number. He stared at it, his thumb hovering over the screen. Answer or run. The choice felt like it would define him forever. Caleb's heart pounded as he stared at his phone, the screen glowing with Diane's name. The James River churned below, its dark waters mirroring the chaos in his mind. Jamie stood beside him, his presence a quiet anchor. But even that couldn't stop the flood of fear and guilt threatening to drown Caleb. He didn't answer. Instead, he shoved the phone into his pocket and turned to Jamie. "She's close," he said, his voice tight. "Marcus said she's asking around, showing people my picture." Jamie's brow furrowed, but his tone stayed steady. "You don't owe her an explanation right now. You're allowed to choose yourself, Caleb." But choosing himself felt like betraying the woman who'd bandaged his scraped knees and stayed up late helping him with math homework. Diane wasn't just his mom, she was his whole world. Until that world had started to suffocate him. Caleb's eyes stung as he looked out at the river. What if she hates me for this? "She won't," Jamie said, his hand brushing Caleb's. "She's scared. People do crazy things when they're scared. But you're not the one who needs fixing." Caleb wanted to believe him, but the weight of Diane's expectations clung to him like damp clothes. He'd seen the pamphlets, heard the sermons, felt the eyes of Willow Creek judging him. Running away was supposed to free him, but now it felt like he was dragging his guilt along with him. Meanwhile, Diane was unraveling. She'd spent hours driving through Richmond, clutching a photo of Caleb from his last birthday and smiling, holding a sketchbook she'd saved up to buy. She showed it to strangers at gas stations and coffee shops, her voice cracking as she asked, "Have you seen my son?" Most shook their heads, but one barista at a queer-friendly cafe hesitated, recognizing Caleb from earlier that day. He was with a guy in a red hoodie, she said, her tone cautious. They seemed happy. Happy. The word hit Diane like a slap. She'd spent months trying to save Caleb, to pull him back to the path she thought was right. How could he be happy without her? The barista's words echoed as Diane drove toward the riverfront, where the girl had mentioned seeing them last. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white. She wasn't just chasing Caleb, she was chasing the version of him she'd built in her mind. The one who'd grow up to fit the life she'd planned. Back on the bridge, Caleb and Jamie were talking about the future. Jamie was studying art at a community college, dreaming of opening a gallery for queer artists. "You could do it with me," he said, his eyes bright with possibility. "Your sketches are incredible. The world needs to see them." Caleb's chest warmed at the thought. He'd always hidden his drawings, especially the ones of boys holding hands, their faces soft with love. But with Jamie, he felt like those sketches could live in the open. For a moment, he let himself imagine a life where he wasn't afraid to be seen. Then headlights cut through the darkness. Diane's car screeched to a stop at the end of the bridge, and Caleb froze. She stepped out, her coat soaked from the drizzle, her face a mix of relief and fury. "Caleb," she shouted, her voice carrying over the river's hum. "Get in the car. Now." Jamie stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Caleb. "Ma'am, he's not doing anything wrong. He just needs time." Diane's eyes narrowed, taking in Jamie's hoodie, his confident stance. "You don't know my son," she snapped. "You don't know what's best for him." "Mom, stop," Caleb said, his voice breaking. He stepped out from behind Jamie, his hands shaking. "I'm not going back. Not to that camp. Not to Willow Creek. I can't keep pretending I'm someone I'm not." Diane's face softened for a split second, but then her resolve hardened. "You're confused, Caleb. You're too young to understand what you're doing to yourself to us. I'm your mother. I know what's right." "You don't," Caleb said, tears spilling over. "You think you're saving me, but you're killing me." The words hung in the air, raw and heavy. Diane flinched, her hand rising to her chest as if he'd struck her. For a moment, no one spoke. The river roared below, and the city lights flickered like distant stars. Jamie broke the silence. "Let's go, Caleb. You don't have to do this here." He tugged gently at Caleb's sleeve, but Caleb couldn't move. His mother's eyes were locked on his, and he saw something new in them: fear. Yes, but also a flicker of doubt. Diane took a step closer, her voice softer now. "Caleb, I'm scared for you. The world out there, it's not kind to people like to you. I just want you to be safe." Caleb's throat tightened. He wanted to scream, to tell her that the world she feared was the one he needed. But he also saw the woman who'd sacrificed everything for him, who'd stayed up nights worrying about his future. "Mom," he said, his voice barely audible, "I'm not safe with you right now." Diane's breath hitched, and she staggered back as if he'd pushed her. Jamie took Caleb's hand, pulling him gently toward the other end of the bridge. "Come on," he whispered. "We'll figure this out." As they walked away, Caleb glanced back. Diane stood alone, rain streaking down her face, her photo of him clutched against her chest. He wanted to run back, to fix her pain, but he kept walking. For the first time, he was choosing himself. Diane watched them disappear into the night, her heart splintering. She'd lost him not to the world, but to her own fear. She sank to her knees on the wet pavement, the photo crumpling in her hands. Somewhere deep inside, A small voice whispered that she was the one who needed saving. The Richmond streets blurred past Caleb as he and Jamie walked, their hands still clasped. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy with the scent of wet asphalt and possibility. Caleb's heart was a battlefield relief at escaping the bridge clashed with the ache of leaving his mother behind. "Where are we going?" Caleb asked, his voice hoarse from crying. Jamie squeezed his hand. "My place. It's not much. Just a shared apartment with some art kids. But it's safe. You can crash there until you figure out what's next." Caleb nodded, too overwhelmed to argue. Jamie's apartment was in a rundown building near the college, its walls covered in murals and fairy lights. Inside, two of Jamie's roommates were sprawled on a couch, painting each other's nails and blasting indie music. They greeted Caleb with easy smiles. No questions asked. And for the first time in hours, he felt his shoulders relax. "You okay?" Jamie asked, handing him a mug of tea. Caleb stared into the steam rising from the mug. "I don't know. I keep seeing her face." She looked broken. Jamie sat beside him, close but not crowding. "She's your mom. She loves you, even if she's got a messed up way of showing it. But you can't carry her guilt for her." Caleb wanted to believe that, but guilt was a language he spoke fluently. He thought of the nights Diane had come home exhausted, still finding time to make him dinner. He thought of the camp pamphlet, its promises of salvation, and how desperately she'd clung to it. He hated her for it, but he hated himself more for running. Back in Willow Creek, Diane sat in her car outside their house, unable to go inside. The silence of the empty home would be too much. She called Pastor Reynolds again, her voice shaking as she recounted the scene on the bridge. "He's with some boy," she said. He's choosing that life." Pastor Reynolds sighed, his tone gentle but firm. "Diane, God's plan is bigger than our fears. Caleb's lost right now, but prayer and patience will bring him back." Diane wanted to believe him, but the doubt she'd seen in Caleb's eyes lingered. She'd always trusted the church to guide her, but now it felt like a map to nowhere. She drove to the church anyway, slipping into a pew in the empty sanctuary. The stained glass windows glowed faintly, casting shadows that felt like judgment. She prayed, but the words felt hollow. For the first time, she wondered if she was the one who was lost. In Richmond, Caleb couldn't sleep. He lay on Jamie's couch, staring at the ceiling, his phone buzzing with missed calls from Diane. He opened his sketchbook instead, drawing the bridge, the river, his mother's face. The pencil moved like it had a mind of its own, capturing the pain and hope of the night. When Jamie woke up, he found Caleb still sketching, his hands smudged with graphite. "Those are amazing," Jamie said, peering over his shoulder. "You've got a gift. Caleb, don't let anyone make you hide it." Caleb's cheeks warmed. "I've never shown anyone my real stuff. Back home, they'd call it wrong." Jamie's eyes softened. "Then show the world. Start here. Start now." The next day, Jamie took Caleb to an art supply store, where he bought a cheap set of paints with his own money. They spent hours in the apartment, Caleb experimenting with colors while Jamie worked on a canvas of his own. It was the first time Caleb had felt free to create without fear. But every laugh, every brushstroke, was shadowed by the thought of Diane. Diane, meanwhile, was grappling with her own reckoning. At the church, a young woman named Sarah, who led the youth group, approached her. Sarah had heard about Caleb from Marcus and offered a different perspective. "I've met kids like Caleb," she said gently. "They're not broken, Diane. They're just trying to live authentically. Maybe God made them that way for a reason." Diane bristled, but Sarah's words stuck. She drove back to Richmond, this time not to drag Caleb home, but to understand him. She found the cafe where the barista had seen him and sat there, clutching his photo, watching queer kids laugh and talk like they belonged. It was a world she didn't know, and it terrified her, but it also made her wonder what Caleb saw in it. That evening, Caleb and Jamie went to a local open mic night at a queer community center. Caleb hadn't planned to share anything, but Jamie nudged him toward the stage, his sketchbook in hand. Heart pounding, Caleb showed his drawings to the crowd, his voice shaking as he explained the bridge, the river, the fight for his truth. The room erupted in applause, and for a moment, Caleb felt weightless. Unbeknownst to him, Diane was in the back of the room. She'd followed a flyer to the event, her heart racing as she saw Caleb on stage. His vulnerability, his Kuragite was a side of him she'd never seen. Tears streamed down her face as she realized how much she'd missed of her son's heart. When the event ended, Caleb spotted her. His breath caught, and Jamie tensed beside him. Diane approached, her hands raised in surrender. "Caleb," she said, her voice barely audible. "I don't understand everything, but I want to try." Caleb's eyes searched hers, looking for the mother he'd always known. He didn't know if he could trust her yet, but for the first time, he saw a glimmer of hope. The community center buzzed with chatter as Caleb stood frozen, his sketchbook clutched against his chest. Diane's words, "I want to try," hung between them, fragile as a thread. Jamie's hand rested lightly on Caleb's shoulder, a silent reminder that he wasn't alone. I don't know what to say," Caleb stammered, his eyes locked on his mother's. Her face was softer than it had been on the bridge, but the weight of their history pressed down on him. He wanted to believe her, but trust was a bridge he wasn't sure he could cross again. Diane took a hesitant step forward, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. "I saw your drawings, Caleb. They're beautiful. I didn't know you could do that." Her voice cracked, and she looked away, as if ashamed of how little she'd understood her son. Jamie leaned in, whispering, "You don't have to decide anything right now. Take your time." Caleb nodded, his throat tight. "Mom, I'm not going back to Willow Creek. Not yet. I need to be here, where I can be me." Diane's eyes glistened, but she didn't argue. Instead, she nodded, a small, pained gesture. "Can we talk? Just for a little while." They found a quiet corner of the community center, away from the crowd. Jamie stayed nearby, giving them space but ready to step in. Caleb sat across from Diane, his sketchbook a barrier between them. The silence was heavy, filled with years of unspoken truths. "I thought I was protecting you," Diane began, her voice low. "The church, the camp hit was all I knew to do. I was so scared of losing you. Not just to this, but to God, to everything I've been taught." Caleb's fingers tightened on his sketchbook. "You didn't lose me to being gay. Mom, you lost me when you tried to change me. Diane flinched, her hands trembling. I didn't know what else to do. Pastor Reynolds. The church, they said it was a sin. I thought if I could fix it, we'd be okay again. Caleb's chest ached. He wanted to scream, to tell her how much her words had hurt. But he saw the desperation in her eyes. She wasn't the enemy, she was trapped, just like he'd been. Mom, I'm not a sin. I'm your son. And I'm happy here, with people who see me for who I am. Diane's tears fell freely now. She reached for his hand. And this time, he didn't pull away. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. But I don't want to lose you. Caleb, tell me how to start. It was a small crack in the wall between them, but it was enough. Caleb took a deep breath. Just listen to me. Really listen. And stop listening to Pastor Reynolds. Diane managed a shaky laugh, wiping her eyes. I'm trying. I promise. Over the next few days, Caleb stayed with Jamie, but he met Diane for coffee each morning. They talked awkwardly at first, about small things like his art, his dreams, the city. Diane asked questions, hesitant but genuine, about what it meant to be gay, about the community he'd found. Caleb answered as best he could, his guard slowly lowering. One afternoon, Jamie invited Diane to the apartment to see Caleb's paintings. She stood in front of a canvas, a vibrant swirl of colors depicting two boys under a starry sky, their hands intertwined. This is you, she said softly, pointing to one of the figures. And, Jamie. Caleb nodded, his face warm. Yeah. It's how I feel when I'm with him. Diane studied the painting, her expression unreadable. Then she turned to Caleb, her voice steady. It's beautiful. Caleb, you're beautiful. The words hit him like a wave, washing away years of fear. He hugged her, and for the first time in months, it felt like they were on the same side. But Willow Creek wasn't done with them. Marcus texted Caleb, warning him that Pastor Reynolds had been preaching about saving lost souls and mentioning Caleb by name. The town was buzzing, and some of Diane's friends had stopped speaking to her. The pressure was building, and Caleb knew their fragile peace wouldn't last unless Diane faced her community. I need to go back, Diane said one evening, her voice resolute. Not to stay, but to stand up for you. I've been hiding behind the church for too long. Caleb's heart sank. He didn't want her to face that alone, but he wasn't ready to return to Willow Creek. Are you sure? He asked. Diane nodded. I've spent my life doing what they told me. It's time I did what's right. The next morning, Diane drove back to Willow Creek. The church was packed for Sunday service, and Pastor Reynolds was in full swing, preaching about sin and redemption. Diane sat in the back, her hands clenched, waiting for her moment. When the sermon ended, she stood, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Pastor, you're wrong about my son, she said, her voice trembling but clear. Caleb isn't lost. He's found himself, and I'm proud of him. The congregation gasped, whispers rippling through the pews. Pastor Reynolds faltered, his face reddening. Diane, this isn't the place. It's exactly the place. She interrupted. You taught me to love, but you also taught me to fear. I'm done being afraid. My son is gay, and he's perfect the way he is. The church fell silent. Diane walked out, her head high, feeling lighter than she had in years. She didn't know if they'd ever welcome her back. But for the first time, she didn't care. Back in Richmond, Caleb painted, his brush moving with a freedom he'd never known. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew he wasn't alone anymore. Diane's stand at the church sent shockwaves through Willow Creek. By the time she returned to Richmond, her phone was flooded with messages, some angry, some supportive, but most just confused. She didn't read them. For the first time in years, she felt unburdened, like she'd shed a skin that never fit. But the weight of what came next rebuilding with Caleb loomed large. In Jamie's apartment, Caleb was sketching again, this time a portrait of his mother. He drew her as he'd seen her at the community center, her eyes soft with new understanding. Jamie watched over his shoulder, a grin spreading across his face. You're going to show her that one, right? Caleb hesitated. Maybe. It feels personal. It's you, Jamie said. That's what makes it special. Their quiet moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Caleb's heart jumped, half expecting Diane. But it was Sarah, the youth group leader from Willow Creek. She'd driven to Richmond, her face flushed with excitement. Your mom's the talk of the town, she said, stepping inside. She stood up to Pastor Reynolds in front of everyone. People are freaking out. Caleb's eyes widened. What? Sarah recounted the scene, her voice full of admiration. She said she was proud of you, Caleb. I've never seen anything like it. Half the congregation walked out with her. Caleb sat down hard, his sketchbook sliding to the floor. He'd spent so long fighting to be seen, and now his mother was fighting for him. It was too much to process. Jamie handed him a glass of water, his touch grounding. You okay? I don't know, Caleb admitted. I didn't think she'd ever do something like that. Sarah smiled. She's learning. And she's not alone. Some of us back home are starting to question things too. You've got more allies than you think. The news lit a spark in Caleb. He'd always felt like an outsider in Willow Creek. But maybe change was possible. Still, he wasn't ready to go back. Richmond was his refuge, a place where he could breathe, create, and love without fear. He looked at Jamie, who was watching him with quiet pride, and felt a warmth he'd never known. Diane arrived later that day, her eyes tired but bright. She hugged Caleb tightly, and this time, he hugged her back without hesitation. I heard what you did, he said, his voice thick. Thank you. Diane pulled back, her hands on his shoulders. I should have done it sooner. I was so caught up in what I thought was right. I forgot to see you. I'm so sorry. Caleb. He nodded, tears prickling his eyes. I know, Mom. I need time to trust this. I'll wait, she said simply. As long as it takes. Over the next week, Caleb and Diane found a tentative rhythm. She rented a small apartment in Richmond, determined to stay close while giving him space. They met daily, sometimes for coffee, sometimes to walk along the river. Diane listened as Caleb talked about his art, his fears, and his hopes for a life with Jamie. She didn't always understand, but she tried. And that was enough for now. Meanwhile, Jamie introduced Caleb to a local art collective, a group of queer artists who welcomed him with open arms. They encouraged him to submit his work to a gallery show. And to his shock, one of his paintings, The Boys Under the Starry Sky, was accepted. The night of the show, Caleb stood in front of his piece, nervous but proud, as strangers admired his work. Jamie was by his side, beaming, and Diane was there too, her eyes shining with a mix of awe and regret. "You did this," she said, gesturing to the painting. "All those years. I thought I knew you, but I missed so much." Caleb took her hand. "You're here now? That's what matters." But the past wasn't done with them. Back in Willow Creek, Pastor Reynolds was rallying the congregation, calling Diane's actions a betrayal. He'd started a campaign to reclaim the town's values. And some of Caleb's old classmates were spreading rumors online, targeting him and Diane. Marcus texted Caleb, warning him that things were escalating. "They're planning a protest or something," he wrote. "Be careful." Caleb showed the message to Jamie and Diane, his stomach twisting. "They won't let this go, will they?" Diane's face hardened. "They don't get to decide who we are? Not anymore." Jamie nodded. "We've got your back, Caleb. And there's a whole community here ready to fight for you." That night, Caleb lay awake, his mind racing. He'd found a home in Richmond, a place where he could be himself. But Willow Creek's shadow still loomed. He knew he couldn't keep running forever. If he wanted a future with Jamie, with his art, with his mother, he'd have to face the past head on. The next morning, he made a decision. "I'm going back," he told Diane and Jamie over breakfast. "Not to stay, but to show them I'm not ashamed. I want them to see me." Diane's eyes widened, but she nodded. "I'll go with you." Jamie took his hand. "We'll go together." As they planned their return, Caleb felt a mix of fear and resolve. Willow Creek had tried to break him, but he was stronger now. And with Diane and Jamie by his side, he was ready to show them who he really was. The drive back to Willow Creek felt like crossing into another world. Caleb sat in the back seat of Diane's car, his sketchbook open on his lap, while Jamie rode shotgun, his hand resting on Diane's seat. The Virginia countryside rolled by, fields of green giving way to the familiar streets of their small town. Caleb's chest tightened with every mile. "You sure about this?" Jamie asked, glancing back. His voice was calm, but his eyes held a quiet worry. Caleb nodded, though his hands trembled as he sketched. "I have to do this. If I don't, they'll always think they won." Diane's eyes flicked to him in the rearview mirror. "I'm proud of you, Caleb. And I'm here, no matter what happens." Her words steadied him, but the weight of Willow Creek loomed. The town hadn't changed. Same white church steeple, same faded storefronts, same judgmental stares. When they pulled into the community center parking lot, a small crowd was already gathered, holding signs that read "Family Values" and "Save Our Children." Pastor Reynolds stood at the front, his face grim. Caleb's heart sank, but Jamie squeezed his shoulder. "They're loud, but they're not the whole town. Look." He pointed to another group, smaller but growing, holding rainbow flags and signs that read "Love is love." Sarah was there, along with Marcus and a few of Caleb's old classmates. their faces defiant. Diane stepped out of the car first, her chin high. Caleb followed, clutching his sketchbook like a shield. Jamie walked beside him, his presence a quiet strength. The protesters' shouts grew louder, but Caleb focused on the faces of his allies, their support a lifeline. Pastor Reynolds stepped forward, his voice booming. Diane, Caleb, this isn't the way. Come back to the church. Let us help you. Caleb's stomach churned, but he stepped forward, his voice steady. I don't need your help. I'm not broken. I'm gay, and I'm proud of who I am. The crowd went silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Diane took his hand, her grip firm. He's my son, she said, her voice clear. And I love him exactly as he is. Murmurs rippled through the protesters, some lowering their signs. Pastor Reynolds' face reddened, but before he could respond, Sarah stepped forward, holding a megaphone. This town isn't just yours, Pastor. It's ours too. And we're here for Caleb. The Rainbow Flag group cheered, their voices drowning out the protesters. Marcus ran to Caleb, pulling him into a hug. I'm sorry I didn't stand up sooner, he said. I'm with you now. Caleb's eyes stung, but he smiled. Thanks, man. That means everything. The standoff continued, with Pastor Reynolds trying to rally his supporters. But the tide was shifting. More townspeople joined Sarah's group, some hesitantly, others with conviction. Caleb saw faces he'd known his whole life, neighbors, teachers, even the diner waitress who'd served him and Diane countless times. They weren't all ready to embrace him, but they were listening. Diane spoke next, her voice carrying over the crowd. I was wrong. I thought I had to fix my son, but he's the one who showed me what love really means. If you're standing here judging him, maybe you're the ones who need to change. The words hit like a thunderclap. Some protesters walked away, their signs drooping. Others stayed, their faces conflicted. Pastor Reynolds tried to speak, but his voice was lost in the growing cheers from Caleb's supporters. That evening, the community center hosted an impromptu gathering, organized by Sarah and Marcus. Caleb brought his sketchbook, sharing his drawings with anyone who'd look. People crowded around, their curiosity outweighing their fear. One older woman, a church regular, touched his arm. I don't understand everything, she said, but your art, it's from the heart. Caleb nodded, his throat tight. That's all I've ever wanted to share. Diane watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling. She'd spent so long fearing this moment, but now she saw her son shining, surrounded by people who saw him for who he was. Jamie stood beside her, his arms crossed, a proud smile on his face. He's something special, isn't he? He said. He is, Diane agreed. And so are you. As the night wound down, Caleb found Diane outside, staring at the stars. You okay, Mom? He asked. She turned to him, her eyes soft. I'm more than okay. I'm starting to see the world the way you do. They hugged, the weight of their journey settling into something new hope. Caleb knew Willow Creek wouldn't change overnight, but he'd planted a seed. And with Diane and Jamie by his side, he felt ready to face whatever came next. Back in Richmond, Caleb's painting sold at the gallery show, and the collective invited him to join their next project. He and Jamie started planning a series of queer art workshops, a way to give other kids like him a space to create. Diane, meanwhile, began attending a support group for parents of LGBTQ+ kids, learning to navigate her new reality. But the fight wasn't over. Pastor Reynolds and his supporters were still active, and Caleb knew they'd face more battles. For now, though, he was content to live in the moment, surrounded by love and art, with a mother who was finally learning to see him. Caleb's return to Richmond felt like coming home. The city's vibrant streets, alive with art and acceptance, were a stark contrast to Willow Creek's stifling silence. He and Jamie settled into a routine mornings painting, afternoons at the community center, evenings dreaming of a future where they could build something together. Diane stayed in Richmond, her small apartment a short walk from Jamie's, and their daily coffee dates became a cornerstone of Caleb's new life. But Willow Creek's shadow lingered. Marcus kept Caleb updated. Pastor Reynolds was doubling down, holding prayer vigils to save the town. Some of Caleb's old classmates had started a smear campaign online, posting old photos of him with cruel captions. The hate stung, but Caleb refused to let it define him. He poured his energy into his art, creating a new Paisea mural of a rainbow breaking through storm clouds, a tribute to his journey. Diane, too, was changing. The support group opened her eyes to stories like her parents who'd feared their kids' identities but learned to embrace them. She started volunteering at the community center, helping organize events for queer youth. One day, she brought Caleb a flyer for a regional art festival, her eyes bright with excitement. "You should submit your mural," she said. "It's powerful, Caleb. It could change hearts." Caleb hesitated. The festival was in Charlottesville, not far from Willow Creek, and the thought of facing that world again made his stomach twist. But Jamie, ever his anchor, nodded encouragingly. "You've got something to say," he said. "Let them hear it." Caleb submitted the mural, and to his shock, it was accepted as a centerpiece for the festival. The news spread, and soon Marcus texted that Willow Creek was buzzing some with pride, others with outrage. Pastor Reynolds called it a provocation, urging the town to boycott the event. But Sarah and her allies were organizing a group to attend, determined to support Caleb. The festival was a whirlwind of color and sound. Caleb's mural stood tall in the main square, its vibrant hues drawing crowds. He stood beside it, Jamie's hand in his, as people stopped to ask about his inspiration. He told them about Willow Creek, about his mother's journey, about finding a home in Richmond. Each conversation felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of his story. Diane was there, her pride evident in every smile. She'd invited Sarah and Marcus, who brought a dozen Willow Creek supporters, their rainbow pins gleaming. But the festival wasn't without tension. A small group of protesters from Willow Creek arrived, holding signs decrying sinful art. Pastor Reynolds wasn't among them, but his influence was clear. Caleb's heart raced as the protesters shouted, but he refused to back down. He stepped onto a small stage, microphone in hand, and addressed the crowd. "This mural is for anyone who's ever felt like they didn't belong," he said, his voice steady. "It's for my mom, who learned to love me for who I am. It's for all of you, who showed me I'm not alone." The crowd cheered, drowning out the protesters. Diane stepped forward, tears in her eyes, and hugged Caleb in front of everyone. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. Jamie joined them, his grin wide. And for a moment, the world felt right. But the protesters didn't leave. One, a former neighbor, approached Caleb after his speech, her face twisted with anger. "You're tearing this town apart," she said. "Your mother should be ashamed." Diane stepped between them, her voice firm. "The only shame is in hating someone for who they love. My son is a gift, and I'm done letting anyone tell me otherwise." The woman backed off, but the encounter left Caleb shaken. Jamie pulled him aside, his hands cupping Caleb's face. "You're stronger than they'll ever know," he said, "and you're not fighting alone." That night, the festival ended with a concert, and Caleb danced with Jamie under the stars, Diane cheering from the sidelines. For the first time, he felt like he could be himself without apology. But he knew the battle wasn't over. Willow Creek's wounds ran deep, and change would take time. Back in Richmond, Caleb and Jamie started planning their art workshops, securing a grant from the community center. Diane became a regular volunteer, her nursing skills coming in handy when kids needed a listening ear or a bandage. She and Caleb grew closer, their bond forged in hard-won understanding. But Pastor Reynolds wasn't done. He announced a reclamation rally in Willow Creek, inviting regional churches to join. Marcus warned Caleb it was aimed at cleansing the town of outside influences. Caleb knew he couldn't ignore it. If he wanted Willow Creek to change, he'd have to face it one last time. "We'll go together," Diane said, her voice resolute. Jamie nodded, his hand in Caleb's. "Let's finish this." As they prepared for the rally, Caleb painted a new Paisea portrait of Diane, her face radiant with love and strength. He titled it Healing, a testament to the journey they'd shared. Whatever happened in Willow Creek, he knew they'd face it as a family, not the one he'd been born into, but the one he'd chosen. The morning of the reclamation rally dawned crisp and clear, the kind of day that made Willow Creek look deceptively peaceful. Caleb, Diane, and Jamie drove into town, their car filled with a tense silence. Caleb's new painting, Healing, was carefully packed in the trunk, a symbol of everything they'd fought for. He didn't know if it would make a difference, but he needed to show Willow Creek who he and his mother had become. The town square was packed when they arrived. Pastor Reynolds stood on a makeshift stage, his voice booming through a megaphone, preaching about restoring God's order. His supporters, clutching signs and Bibles, filled half the square. But across from them, Sarah's group stood strong, their rainbow flags bright against the gray morning. Marcus waved to Caleb, his grin nervous but determined. Caleb's heart pounded as he stepped out of the car, Jamie and Diane flanking him. He carried Healing under his arm, its canvas wrapped but ready. The crowd's eyes turned to him, some curious, others hostile. Pastor Reynolds paused mid-sentence, his gaze locking onto Caleb. "Diane," he called, his voice dripping with false concern. "Bring your son back to us. There's still time to save him." Diane's jaw tightened, but she didn't waver. "My son doesn't need saving," she said, her voice carrying across the square. "He's already found his truth. Maybe you should listen to him." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Caleb felt the weight of their stares, but Jamie's hand on his back steadied him. He stepped forward, unwrapping the painting and holding it up for all to see. The portrait of Diane glowed in the sunlight, her face a beacon of love and resilience. "This is my mom," Caleb said, his voice clear despite the tremor in his hands. "She thought she had to fix me, but she learned to love me instead. This painting is called healing, because that's what we've done together. And that's what this town needs." The square fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Sarah's group cheered, their voices breaking the tension. Some of Pastor Reynolds' supporters looked away, their signs lowering. Others stared at the painting, their faces conflicted. Pastor Reynolds tried to regain control. "This is not God's way," he shouted. "We must stand firm against sin." But his words faltered as Sarah took the megaphone. "Love isn't sin," she said. "Caleb and Diane are showing us what courage looks like. If you can't see that, you're the ones who are lost." The crowd fractured. Some of Reynolds' supporters walked away, their heads bowed. Others joined Sarah's group, their faces tentative but open. Marcus stepped forward, holding a rainbow flag, and handed it to Caleb. "This is your town too," he said. Caleb took the flag, his eyes stinging. He looked at Diane, who nodded, tears streaming down her face. Jamie wrapped an arm around him, whispering, "You did it." The rally didn't end the division in Willow Creek, but it cracked the foundation of fear that had held the town captive. Pastor Reynolds left the stage. His influence diminished. Over the next weeks, more townspeople reached out to Caleb and Diane, some apologizing, others asking questions. Sarah started a support group at the community center, and Diane became its first member. Caleb and Jamie returned to Richmond, their art workshops thriving. Caleb's mural toured other festivals, spreading his message of hope. Diane sold her house in Willow Creek and moved permanently to Richmond, closer to Caleb and his new life. She kept healing on her living room wall, a reminder of their journey. One evening, as they sat together in Diane's apartment, Caleb showed her a new sketch-of family portrait of him, Jamie, and her, their faces radiant under a rainbow sky. "This is us now," he said, his voice soft. Diane took the sketch, her fingers tracing their faces. "This is more than I ever dreamed," she said. "You showed me what love really means, Caleb." He hugged her, feeling the weight of their past lift. Willow Creek would always be part of him, but it no longer defined him. He'd found his home not in a place, but in the people who loved him for who he was. As Caleb and Jamie walked hand in hand through Richmond streets, the city lights glowing around them, Caleb felt a quiet certainty. The world wasn't perfect, and the fight for acceptance wasn't over. But with his mother's love, Jamie's strength, and his own voice, he was ready for whatever came next. The healing had begun, and it was enough.